28th, 2022, 5:29 p.m. Welcome to the City of Lacombe Council meeting. I will call the meeting to order and start out with the most important stuff first. I understand that we have a new member to our team. Chief Gowdy, would you like to introduce? Very good.
Thank you very much, Mayor Creasy and Council. I would like to introduce Paula Law, our new Economic Development Officer. I know she's not a stranger to most of you, given her last 8 years that she served as Lacombe County Reeve. Just really briefly, I'd like to say that we're excited to have Paula on the team and look forward to the new opportunities having her on board present.
I know that many of you have worked with Paula on various boards and commissions in the past, as have I, and I've always enjoyed our time spent together. Look forward to working with you over the coming years. Super. Thanks, Paula. This is a point of information. Councillor Hoekstra will not be joining us this evening. She sends her regrets. Move on to the agendas. See if I can get the consent and regular agendas correct this evening. First and foremost, with respect to the consent agenda, are there any items that anyone would care to have removed? Councillor Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Casey. Sorry, I don't have anything I want removed. I guess I was just curious if 2.1C was just a heading title or if there was supposed to be something attached there for bylaw first reading.
Coordinator Bellabono.
It's just the header title. So we'll leave them on when we don't have any items, just to remind us that we do have them.
Thank you for that reminder. So no one else has anything for that? We're all good with respect to the consent agenda. Very good. Then for the overall agenda, do we have any additions or deletions? While we ponder that, I would like for us to have one simple reordering in order to accommodate our Economic Development Officer. Item 6.3, I would like to move up to the top of the list and have it reordered into 6.1 and move the other two down. I think that's too much of an inconvenience for anyone. Is there anything else? Seeing none, could I have a motion to move as amended? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I will move the agenda as amended.
Very good, thank you. All those in favor? Very good. And I believe that we do need a separate one for the consent agenda, so we will do so now. If we could have a motion. Councillor Connick.
I was move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Very good. I think that is one item that has been perhaps a little more troubling to get used to with our consent agenda is the adoption of them. And our coordinator has informed me that according to our policy, we do need two separate ones at this point, but that might be something that we consider adjusting next time around for that policy review rather. So that'll bring us down to the item on your agendas as 6.3, which we have renumbered as 6.1, the Land Developer Investment Engagement Strategy. Director Thompson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm delighted tonight to present the Land Developer Investor Engagement Administrative Directive. Documenting the process for investor engagement is one of administration's identified tactics to support council's strategic priority to grow the community by strengthening conditions for investor attraction. Administrative directives fall under the CAO's scope of authority delegated by council. The CAO authorizes administrative directives to outline the key steps to ensure regulatory or policy compliance, a consistent approach, and reporting expectations. The purpose of this administrative directive is to establish a process administration follows to demonstrate to prospective land developers that the city has a corporate culture and regulatory environment conducive for investment and development. Informally, administration already follows the general approach outlined in the directive. Formalizing the steps ensures consistent, organized, and efficient response to prospective land developers who express interest in investing in the city of Lacombe. The directive outlines the steps staff take to produce one of two new documents for the prospective investor: the Land Development Investor Roadmap, known as the roadmap throughout the directive, or the Zoning and Municipal Services Report, also known as just the report. The roadmap is intended for complex developments that are typically larger, vaguer, and have either no obvious or more than one viable approval pathway with the city. Complex developments require input from multiple city departments in advance of a formal development application. The Zoning and Services Report is intended for simple developments and are typically straightforward with a clearer approval pathway that does not require pre-application multi-departmental input. However, multi-departmental input may still be required as a normal course of processing a simple development application. To support staff in this process, a number of templates have been developed, with more underway, and the municipal roadmap template is included in Schedule J of the directive. Happy to answer any questions the council has about this new administrative directive.
We don't seem to have a lot of input. Councillor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This is, I think, it's great to see. I always like to see some engagement and look forward to our new liaison, I guess I can say, with our economic development. And I guess as not only we wanting to have the process flow as what I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress in the last 4 years and through with administration and I guess I think, and I look at as a sales point, is I think there's some areas where we might identify that we could, how we make different communities, everybody's can have some pros and selling points, but even as alluded to with CO Gowdy, our corporate tax rate compared to other communities might be vastly low. And I guess it's just, are we going to engage in some marketing that might, get that information out that we are in a better corporate tax rate position than what some communities have within their cities and towns and so forth. Like there is a lot of significant advances with our geography and so forth, and our tax rates that, all due respect, we could just have a marketing plan in the future as well. This is obviously one wonderful direction going forward, but that's just and you can't do it overnight, but some areas I'd like to see, start as well.
So certainly something to look at moving forward. I think this is geared more towards the actual interaction with the developers that you have coming in at hand. However, I would expect moving forward now with the extra manpower that maybe that marketing section could be forthcoming. Is that something that you have on the horizon, Director Lapointe?
I believe the strategic plan does look at a comparative analysis between municipalities as well. And so I think we'd want to do that analysis to discover what the comparative, what our advantages are, our competitive advantages, so that we could prepare that marketing plan.
Very good. And I don't think we were expecting any kind of time frame with that, but it's nice to know that it is on the horizon and will be bringing to the attention of council at some point in the future. Thank you for that. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So just for clarification, this is being brought forward to council simply as a information. It's not required that we're accepting it, because this is more of an administrative type thing. And I greatly appreciate both the document itself and also the reason for it. I think it's great when we sort of solidify what the process is, because I think that gives more of a guarantee to people, and it does help with things like transparency, because you can point to criteria. I guess my question on this, and maybe I missed it in the memo, but are these intended to be available on the website so that prospective developers can find them on their own, or is this something that they actually need to approach the city to have access to?
To Councillor Hibbs, on your first point regarding administrative directives, yeah, certainly it's not It's not common and nor is it normal practice for administrative directors to come to council for approval. This was one that was specifically tied to council's strategic plan and more specifically administration's tactical plan. And so that's why it's before council tonight. But in terms of the publishing of the documents, we don't intend to publish the documents. There could be proprietary or competitive information that is included within the document itself. So we would intend it to remain confidential between the city and the developer. Of course, if the developer said that it was okay to be shared, then at that point we might consider publishing it or sharing it more widely with the public if it was something that we mutually agreed on. But we expect that most developers at this stage of the game, when they're exploring and just having discussions with the city, that they would want those conversations to be confidential and remain that way.
Anyone else? Would you care to make a motion in this regard? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I'd go ahead and make the recommended motion that council accept the land development investor engagement administrative directive as information.
Thank you. Before we do vote, so there wasn't a lot of input from council. I would suggest by that very fact that everyone is on board with the process as it's been defined thus far. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do kind of want to expand a bit more on Councillor Hibbs. Like the, I personally received a lot of wonderful feedback from some of the contractors of the changes in the process that have made it more timely and flowing. That has been very well received, and I guess this is another part of the process to continue that. And I guess it just like I say, not only just the marketing of whatever of the future of what our advantages are, just to continue that communication of the advancement and the efficiency of process. I guess I want to keep. I would love to see that administration still tries to get out there that how we are, and we have changed the process to be more timely. And I think that's still, you can do that without the marketing point, is that this process is laid out for the advantage of the relationships between the various divisions of administration and the developers. I think that could be put out there. I'm sure you've got a list of RFP contractors that, you know, though there's confidentiality, I think that engagement of the direction that you're still positively moving forward could still be put out there, I mean, like in the short term, if that makes sense.
Chief Gowdy?
It does make sense, and I think we had planned to look at a media release and a bit of an information plan if council accepts it as information this evening, to make sure that people are aware of some of that ongoing work that still continues to happen.
Very good, thank you. I see no other lights on, so with respect to the administrative directive motion, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. Director Piche, item, I guess it is newly numbered as 6.2, our second item, the community standards review, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, Council. Tonight, I'm bringing forward Bylaw 468, the Community Standards Bylaw, for Council review and direction. As part of the strategic planning session, it was requested by Council to review the Community Standards Bylaw and consider any changes for improvement. Administration has scheduled this item to be in progress for Q2 of 2022, and so we're actually a few days ahead of schedule in starting this strategic tactic. Administration has consulted with bylaw enforcement services to determine areas that are difficult to enforce due to either lack of clarification or some of the wording, and suggestions that could improve that bylaw. The areas that are highlighted are the following: trees and alleys and over sidewalks, by providing specific clearance for when trees become overgrown is recommended. When an order is received, it is hard for residents to determine the acceptable height to cut trees, and being able to provide a specific height removes that guesswork. In regards to weeds, bylaw enforcement services have provided residents with direction when it comes to prohibited noxious weeds. However, there is no specific direction in the bylaw for noxious weeds. And those weeds, if they become unsightly or overgrown, they're usually wrapped up with a grass cleanup. However, it would be more helpful if noxious weeds were explicitly included within the bylaw to be controlled rather than eradicated. And then again with grass, currently the grass length is considered unsightly at 8 inches. Administration is looking for direction from council to see if there's an appetite to change that height. It is also requested that we add a clause that excludes ornamental grass or xeriscaping grasses because they end up being quite a large, quite a higher level than just 8 inches. Vegetation on sidewalks. It's similar to snow and ice, where vegetation growing in sidewalk cracks can be a safety hazard. It can also make it difficult for strollers and wheelchairs to traverse the sidewalks easily. And adding a clause to ensure that residents are aware of their responsibility for maintaining those walkways and sidewalks that abut or flank their properties to be free of vegetation would allow more education and enforcement by bylaw enforcement. Noise is another area that is a bit of concern. There has been some frustration experienced by residents and businesses in certain areas during the winter season when it comes to snow clearing with heavy equipment. The bylaw does state that there is a 150-meter buffer where snow clearing can occur within the quiet hours of the city. However, this is not possible for a small number of businesses with large parking lots. Administration is going to be looking for some direction on how council would like to see that, how council would like to see us proceed with that concern. And the last one is unsightly premises. Administration is looking for direction from council as to the extent of enforcement that they would like to see bylaw enforcement services undertake when it comes to the deterioration or lack of maintenance of buildings on properties. Some properties have clean yards and are well organized, but the buildings are not kept up with the general maintenance. For example, there's like chipping paint or cracked windows, rolled shingles, no siding, etc. If council wishes to enforce on these unsightly properties issues, would council be open to administration for sourcing out contractors? Administration would like to develop either some guidelines in place or see how you'd like us to work with that. In terms of engagement for the public, we're going to be utilizing the IAP2 engagement spectrum. You'll see on the memos now that there will be a new table included in your memo to help understand the level of engagement that each item will entail. So for this one, council, we do see administration does see this as a consultation process where we provide the information and we gather feedback back from the public. So the methods that we were hoping to do this with is through including this item of community standards bylaw as an item at the 2022 spring trade show on the information boards, inviting comments on the city's social media channels, including any recommended changes in the bi-weekly city pages in the local newspaper, and an email address will be set up to receive these comments. And of course, all these comments will come back to council for consideration during any deliberations of any amendments. And if council has any other suggestions that they would like us to address regarding the community standards bylaw, we'll certainly be open to considering them. At this time, if there's any questions, I am happy to take those.
Thank you, Director Piche. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think this is obviously going to be pretty important for a few people, certainly in this community. And I think generally there's going to be some interest just in this topic. So I'm really happy to see it come forward. I'm very happy to see it tied in with the spring trade show, because I think that does give a really great opportunity to have a good discussion about these things. I guess my only question at this point would be, I would make the assumption that we would obviously have information boards on some of the proposed changes. But I'm also assuming that we're going to be soliciting from the public if they've got anything else that isn't included in here, but that we should also consider for future amendments before we go through with third reading. Because I feel like there are more things that the public might feel are worthy of being in here. And I guess council will have to decide whether we would agree that most of the public would also agree with that. But yeah, I guess that I just want to make sure that that is the idea, that it's not only what's being proposed in here, it's definitely wide open for the public to make, well, and members of council to make further contributions.
Chief Cuddy?
Definitely, of course, that is, you're right. And I'm sure from my experience working with council, if the public brings you feedback, it will be considered in the second and third readings. These were just items that we've seen arise over the last 3 years and that we've maybe heard from councillors about these being concerns. And so as we move into drafting a first reading or developing those trade show materials, we were hoping that we would get some direction of what council would like to see in some of these areas. And certainly if there's other areas tonight or that come between now and the development of the bylaw or first and second and third reading, of course, they can be worked in.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. 2 questions. With the grass reducing hypothetically from 8 inches to 6, is that going to give bylaw and administration an advantage for those probably, I'm assuming, more constant properties that are an issue? Does it just give you that much more leverage to start the process sooner to, I'm sure they're already somewhat identified, that you can address it for those citizens that have a lot of passion in that area? I'll be broad. And the second question was on the noxious weeds, Sandless Common. I've just, you can see that in the ditches of some of the right of ways, and yet I don't see that on the list. Is it on the list of noxious weeds, or is that, sorry.
Scentless chamomile is a noxious weed.
Right, but I don't see it on the list. But so is noxious weeds broad as through the province on the list, or is it specific to us?
So there's a list of noxious weeds and there's a list of prohibited noxious weeds. Currently, the city's enforcement strategy and bylaw is only around prohibited noxious weeds, not noxious weeds. You do have, the province does maintain both of those lists. However, the regulations allow a local municipality to, by bylaw, add local concerns, I guess, to their enforcement requirements. So if you had a specific one that you wanted to control for, you could add that to either list. So you could say, I'm fine with prohibited noxious, but I do want you also to enforce on scentless chamomile. Or could you do things, and I should know this, but could you say dandelions, something that's not a noxious weed, added to an enforceable status?
But absolutely, but it is not.
Right, it's nothing. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry if I could follow up. So with ongoing history with especially the train right-of-ways being Scentless Chamomile, would that give more opportunity to address that if that was put on specific to our bylaw list? Or is it, obviously you're dealing with that demographics in itself that's difficult, but does that give us further direction to deal with that specific area?
It would allow you to write a municipal ticket. It would not permit the writing of a follow-up provincial ticket because their rules would govern about what's noxious and what's prohibited noxious. And so my experience with the rail lines is that municipal tickets are sometimes ignored. And unless they can be rewritten as provincial tickets, your ability to collect is low.
Councillor Conick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I mean, whole grass height and vegetation and sidewalks. I mean, I have some thoughts on that, but I'll let this play out and see what the community comes up with. A couple of things though, I guess the unsightly premise one, again, I'm willing to let this ride, but I guess I have a bit of an issue with this one because I could see that there may be individuals who say, well, why should I paint my house if the city's going to come do it for me in due time or anything kind of thing. So yeah, we'll see how this plays out. I think all of these are good starting points. Yeah, the 150 minute buffer. If you're looking for something tonight, I think we should probably strictly reinforce that one if that's what you're looking for council tonight. The rest of these, I mean, we'll have a chance to talk about later and see what the community thinks. But is that the only thing you're looking for tonight? Is that one, or is there something else?
Just some direction as to where you would like to see the amendments to be going.
Well, I would like to see that one strictly enforced would be my suggestion. But other than that, yeah.
Thank you. So with respect to 4.2, the vegetation and sidewalks, I was probably one of the more frequent complainers about this. I don't think it's in our best interest to make this a responsibility of each individual landowner in this particular item. I don't think it's reasonable to expect because quite honestly, they may not spray weeds at their own property. So to expect them to do it on sidewalks, I think is going to be an enforcement nightmare. And I don't know that the task is particularly onerous on city crews. Is there some items that I'm missing with respect to personnel training, or is it strictly a time thing, a capacity thing? Why is this something that we're choosing not to do as a normal course of street maintenance? Chief Gowdy?
While it may seem like a straightforward thing, it is not a service that the city has ever offered in my time here. So it certainly is something that can be done, but it involves walking all of the sidewalks with a backpack mounted sprayer or some sort of an equipment type thing. So it's not insurmountable by any means, but nor is it nothing. So it would just be a new service that the city would be offering.
I think if one fat old mayor can do a street in 10 minutes, I think that some personnel can do the entire city in not a great deal of time. And I'm not saying it's not nothing, but I just think that would be a service that does certainly improve the looks, because there's certainly areas in the city that are perhaps a little more chronic than others when there's vegetation growing out of storm drains and sidewalk cracks. It does detract. We've had city crews do the downtown area in the past, and judging by the number of compliments that were received from the public, it is obviously a service that is valued. So something to consider anyway. The other ones, the exact length of grass and whatnot, I'm not unlike Councillor Conick. If it's something that's going to assist enforcement personnel, if it's got to change one way or another, I'm kind of fine with it. It's not a hill to die on, but Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Regarding the length of grass, I mean, if you go to 6 inches, you can come by my house probably just before I cut it and give me a ticket because it'll be more than 6 inches. So just come on, and then dandelions, the neighbors are up 8 inches. I mean, realistically, we can't go to 6 inches. There's no way.
What? I thought you said it would increase revenue on your block.
It would, yeah, for me. As long as it's taxable.
Someone had their, Councillor Dallas, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll just go straight down the list through the 6 points. The trees in the alleys and over sidewalks, I would like to see specific height in place. I think it makes sense. The points in there for specifically city equipment with garbage trucks. I frequently see third-party contractor trucks in other cities with large branches sticking out of their vehicles. So this would be a great tool to reduce damage on equipment and to people's property. classification of the weeds to be enforced through the bylaw. I think, in my mind, stick to just the prohibited, but obviously, if other people have other opinions on that, I'm certainly interested in hearing them. Length of the grass and the weeds. I would like to see the provision in there for the, I'm sorry, missing the word there, for the vanity grass. And as for the length of it, I am not, I'm not partial on whether it's 6 inches or 8 inches. That doesn't make a difference to me personally. I think whatever the enforcement would like to see is probably what's best. Vegetation and sidewalks. This is a tough one. I like the point that we encourage citizens to shovel the sidewalks in front of their properties. So how is this any different? How everyone feels about that might be different because it's a new item to bring to them. Noise from the commercial snow clearing. I've seen this in the RFIs. Again, I am new to these complaints as this was my first winter here, so I am not an expert on what this would like to see, but I would certainly like to see what the professionals having to deal with it have to say about that, as well as other council and citizens. And then the unsightly premises, I'm with Councillor Connick. I have a hard time enforcing personal property such as home painting, property repair. In other cases, I have seen contractors come in and just completely mow down hedges and trailer out garbage from people's yards. And so, I don't know, I've been witness to both sides of it. So I'm not sure where I stand on that. I like the idea of having a tool to do it though for absolute worst case scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I'll just go item by item as well. Trees and alleyways and over sidewalks, I think that's something long overdue, and I'm glad to see that we would be considering doing that because it's highly problematic, both for vehicle traffic as well as people just walking on sidewalks. As far as the noxious weeds and prohibited noxious weeds, I would like us to tackle noxious weeds, but only in the fact that it would be like a height thing, not necessarily an eradication of it, because obviously that would be unrealistic. Grass height, I'm assuming that the idea behind reducing it from potentially say 8 to 6 would be that you're getting a bit of a jump on a problem property, because if you're waiting till it's 8, then by the time it actually gets addressed, we're now talking like 10, 12, whatever, you lost something in there. I don't know. I do respect what Councillor Gullickson said. I know even for me, like, especially if it's dry out, I'm going to leave my grass longer on purpose because I'm trying to be a little bit more environmental. So honestly, unless I really hear a lot from the public, I'm fine with it being 8, to be honest with you. Vegetation and sidewalks, that's a tricky one. I'm probably a little bit more along the lines of what Councillor Dallas has brought up about we expect people to shovel sidewalks, so why wouldn't we be expecting them to maintain a little bit of sidewalk in the summertime? Now, that being said, if we start getting down this route, that means the city will be on the hook for taking care of all of the sidewalk that isn't in front of somebody's house, because obviously there's going to be a lot of it. Now, do I think that that's a bad thing? No, actually, probably not, because as it was pointed out, when you have things growing in the sidewalk, it's actually causing it to break down faster as well. So I think kind of in the long run, it's probably something good like road maintenance is. So I would say probably, but I'd like to hear from the public before I make a firm stance on that one. Noise, I wanted a clarification on that one. So we're talking about any kind of like snow removal, whether that's the parking lot or whether that's a sidewalk, or is this more geared towards the parking lot? So like the big trucks and the dump,
So I have actually talked with a contractor who's given me permission to share this as an example site. One of our local contractors works for a grocery store, clearing the parking lot. And so this grocery store has potentially customers and staff coming at 7 a.m. And so the franchise requires them to have that cleared prior to opening hours. But to do so, because they are in some cases within 20 meters of residential property, they are in violation of the bylaw and are left in this really tough spot where their argument is people chose to purchase a home beside commercial property. They knew that there would be some noise associated with that commercial property, just like if you situated residential property near an industrial property. And they feel they've been put into an untenable situation where their comment to me was, well, I guess, can we work out some sort of season ticket then for the violation, because I have to do this. And so that we're in a tough spot in looking how to enforce that.
Okay, and that's what I assumed that you meant. So, and given that, I would think that it would be realistic to expect that we allow businesses to clear their their parking lots off hours. Has been done that way for forever. And I honestly don't think that was the intent when the bylaw was written, was that situation. I think it was more the things like a sidewalk getting done at 5 a.m. or that sort of thing. So like the snow blowers. So that would be my take on it. Again, I'd like to hear obviously what members of the public say, but I think that they also would say that that's reasonable. Again, you bought a house next to an industrial or like a property like that. That's an expectation. And then the last thing with the unsightly premise, that one I've always struggled with, because how far does the city go with telling you what you do on your property, what your property looks like? I mean, this is the balance that you try to strike with any of these things, honestly, any community standards. So I also have a problem with, for example, say you decide that you go in and that garage needs painting or whatever, that type of activity has a dollar value added to it. And not everybody can just pull out of their hat, whatever that's going to cost, $2,000 to paint their garage. So I understand and I agree with the idea that if you keep your property like tidy, that goes a long way, whether the siding's perfectly painted or whatever. I guess, again, I'd like to hear from what the public on this, but I think our expectations have to be realistic as well as enforceable. So that's just my comments on that.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to speak to the noise from commercial snow clearing. Is there any way that we could put in the bylaw that certain level of noise, like decibel level? Because some of the snow clearing, like if you use equipment, it may not be, well, it wouldn't be as high as if you're using blowers. Would that be a reasonable thing to put in, or would that be too hard to enforce?
Chief Gowdy?
You can, definitely. There is challenges enforcing it because somebody has to be there with a decibel meter at the time when it's happening. I think most snow clearing equipment would be above at times when it's scraping, or it would be above a decibel limit that you would set. I know that at the time that the original, to speak to Councillor Hibbs' comment about intent, when this was originally passed, it was specifically in response to some high velocity backpack blowers. And there was discussion at the time from council of restricting it, of placing the restriction only on that equipment specifically, and not heavy parking lot clearing equipment. It was not supported at the time. They said, no, actually it's about noise. And there actually even was a specific discussion, if I recall, about grass cutting being potentially equally irritating if it happened outside of the posted hours. So certainly that is something that was considered and could be implemented if council chose, would be to say the restriction is specifically to high velocity snow blowers.
Can I follow up?
Certainly.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I mean, have there been a lot of complaints about equipment? No. So I suggested that's probably, if there's no complaints about the equipment, like for example, at the co-op parking lot or whatever, or Sobeys, moving snow, I'm wondering how much of a concern that really would be to us when it's not that's not being complained about.
Chief Gotti?
So just to clarify, there's not been a lot of complaints, but there hasn't been no complaints.
Yeah, there's always going to be some complaints for sure.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In regards to the noise, it's just a construction company is responsible for OH&S, which is backup beepers that are probably louder than the actual scraping of the pavement. So I think to limit decibel of noise, you're just creating more gray areas because the contractor is still under OH&S to follow proper safety procedures, which is the equipment and the backup beepers, which is an example, right? Which is probably louder than scraping of the pavement. So I think most people that hopefully are reasonable within reason that are going to have to respect that. How often are actually removing snow? What, 10 times in the winter? You know, 10 nights we're talking out of the whole winter. I'm just guessing a couple times a month. I have no idea. Some people do it more than others. I'm just throwing numbers out, but I can appreciate I think we have to realize what's reasonably enforceable without creating bylaw enforcement out of reason. I guess I think we all have to practically look at. And like when you start going inside people's properties, like Councillor Hibbs is saying, and we've all alluded to, how much do you truly get involved in people's property? There's some very extremes that we went through the MGA to deal with those extreme properties. And I think was what is expected. Nothing more as we have heart and pride in our community, but I think we have to all be within reason of what is truly enforceable. So.
Anyone else? So Director Piché, you were suggesting you're just after some input and to bring this forward into the public eye. There's no other formal direction that you require at this time?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think that does conclude that item for this evening. The director just said not, so. Councillor Dallas?
No. Okay, sorry, I was just going to.
No need to be, it's your prerogative.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate you calling on me. I will turn my light off. Thank you.
Okay, then item 6.2 is listed on your agenda. Director Thompson, the on-street patio policy and specifically drainage amendment required.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy, I don't believe we had a motion.
You're correct, we did not because we were not required to have one.
Okay.
But thank you for the reminder.
Just have a question.
Councillor Ross?
So would we not still receive this as information?
Not unless somebody makes a motion accordingly.
Sorry, I don't know what direction to go.
I specifically asked the question to the director. If someone chooses to make that motion, that's perfectly fine.
I'll make a motion. That's
Very well.
I'll say that council directs administration to prepare bylaws after the coffee with council for further community information, or how do we want? Because you still want direction. Just take his information, keep it simple. Okay, I'll say that council receives this community standards bylaws information.
Very well. Is there any additional input on this item? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. So the on-street patio policy, Director Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. The on-street patio policy has been in place since 2020, providing an on-street seating option for businesses. Based on feedback from staff and businesses, we are asking council to consider 2 updates to this policy tonight. One includes various technical amendments to establish requirements that ensure the design and placement of outdoor patios does not block emergency access features or utilities such as stormwater drainage. The second is to allow sidewalk bistro table sets for those businesses who may not want or need a full patio, but would like to offer a smaller amount of outdoor seating placed on the public sidewalk. While it is unlikely a business would knowingly block utilities such as storm drainage, by adding a statement to the policy, it will flag the importance of a business owner noting where infrastructure is located and maintaining proper access when planning their patio application. Staff from our roads and engineering department are happy to come out to site and meet with the owner ahead of the patio install or application to confirm the utility connections, or we can request fire as well to attend if the businesses wish to confirm emergency access areas. Interested businesses may call the Planning and Development Department to set up a staff visit. This policy proposes to also add bistro table sets as an option. These sets would only be considered in locations without patios already in place and would be limited, or is proposed to be limited to 2 chairs per table in the downtown. Like on-street patios, the sets would require an encroachment agreement and would have a lower application fee cost. And they'd be valid for the same length of time of 3 years. If approved, the changes would come into effect immediately for new on-street patio and bistro table applications. However, the approval term for the 3 businesses with existing on-street patios expires next year. So the patio policy changes won't impact them until the 2023 season, assuming they reapply. These businesses were contacted by the city about these proposed changes, and they raised no immediate concerns. We did receive other feedback that the proposed definition of bistro set appears to be limiting and by not including a measure of staff discretion based on alternatives proposed by the applicant. This is not our intention. So for this reason, I'll read in a proposed alternative definition for council's consideration. So bistro set means a small outdoor dining table, 30 inches in width or less, constructed of metal or wood with matching chairs. Bistro sets are typically made to seat 2 people. Applicants may request consideration of alternatives, and planning and development staff have the authority to use such discretion based on individual circumstances. Administration intends to inform the public of council's decision tonight. Director Pichet introduced the table, the IEP2 spectrum table, and this decision would fall, we proposed it to fall under the inform aspect of that spectrum. However, should council decide public consultation on this matter prior to making a decision, they may direct administration to do so per alternative motion number 2 at the end of the motion, or at the end of the RFD. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Question about the bistro set, typically constructed of metal or wood with matching chairs. Why not plastic? Just curious, because that is another common material.
Certainly that would be a valid alternative to propose. The intention around, because we thought about that, would be that the wood and plastic or wood and metal bistro sets were more durable. They're less susceptible to degradation in the sunlight. But they were more likely to suit the aesthetic of the neighborhood, especially in the downtown. And so for that reason, I guess, are suggesting metal or wood as a primary material choice. But certainly a request for plastic could be made as long as the plastic was of a aesthetic quality that matched the building or was fit in with the neighboring aesthetic.
Okay, I mean, unlikely, but possible you could have like rattan, or like there are other options. So those are possible. They're just not specifically listed here. And then again, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but for the placement of the bistro set, I didn't see a requirement as to what the space would need to be that would be left, like for you know, pedestrians or somebody with a stroller, somebody with a more specifically like a wheelchair or some sort of mobility aid. So is that outlined in here?
Director Thompson?
So the intention is that the patios or the areas be free and accessible, and that's an underlying requirement of the policy. And so like on-street patios where they have a you know, a boardwalk around the on-street patio where that has to be free and accessible, that would remain the case for bistro tables as well. There's also requirements in the land use bylaw for the free and clear access of, say, for freestanding signs as well. And so there's a measure of discretion between the bylaw officer and between the applicant to use good judgment in ensuring that there is free and clear access for folks with you know, with wheelchairs or other needs that require that on a sidewalk.
Okay, I can respect that, but I do feel like it makes me a bit nervous because this is an issue that I definitely have been contacted about in the past numerous times. In that case, more so to do with the signs, but I could definitely see the same situation happening here with bistro sets. A lot of the sidewalks are quite wide in places downtown where this, you know, would be set up, and it's a great fit and there's no problem. But I could definitely see this potentially being, you know, not the case in some other places. And I think that accessibility has to be the foremost concern, which is exactly why, like, if we have the patio, you know, the whole sidewalk is available in between, and then you have the patio in one situation, or you've got a separately built, I don't know, sidewalk, I guess, going around the outside. So I really have a bit of a concern that it really has to be a little bit more clear as to what accessible is, I believe, because I just think that would help avoid problems. Because I'd hate for a business to go ahead and buy, you know, bistro tables, for example, and have them all in place and then have the complaints start rolling in about how, you know, it's not accessible, right? And then I guess the only other question I've had, and I've actually had this from members of the public, and I've sort of passed it on, I think, to some of you, maybe informally, is just for the patio policy generally. When a business applies for that, like, they don't pay a fee. There's no rental of public property that happens for the placement of that patio. Is that correct?
There is to Councillor Hibbs, there is a patio application fee for the encroachment of the land. And so for the bistro sets, we're proposing $100 fee. That would be that would get them a 3-year approval.
Okay.
And I believe it's for patios, I think it's $250, if I'm recalling correctly.
And that would be a one-time fee for the
for that 3-year.
For the 3 years.
Yeah.
So while there's a fee, one could hardly construe that as rental for space. It's just a processing fee, correct?
The processing.
That would be a processing fee. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I guess I just would put that out there. I'm not sure exactly whether it's right or whether it's wrong, but you know, it is a concern when we are giving up public property for the benefit of a business. You could, you know, potentially make an argument that we shouldn't be doing that necessarily for free. Again, I don't know exactly where I want to take that right now, but I just wanted to say that out loud so that it's publicly out there that I have passed that on, that thought on.
Thank you. Chief Gowdy.
So just to allay your concern about the discretion, about the width that we would look at, we have ran across this with signage a number of times in the downtown, and we've relied on actually the U.S. Highway Department has a good guide called the Accessible Streets and Walkways Guideline, and it talks about exactly what the required widths would be. So I don't have that right here, but it isn't a discretionary thing. There is a specific guideline that we would look for to make sure it was maintained.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And further to those comments from yourself and Councillor Hibbs, like, if someone comes in to get that permit, they will then be expressly told, you must leave this much room, right? So that's, I think that's probably why, another good reason why we have a fee to get the bistro set, so that you can actually, you're fully aware.
And they will also have they'll be supplying a drawing showing where they're proposing. So that is a concern that I think will restrict widespread adoption of any sort of bistro proliferation downtown. But there are locations where certainly the minimum standards can be maintained.
Go ahead.
And if I may, I would agree with Councillor Hibbs too. I don't think we should be pigeonholing people into wood or metal. I mean, there are some really nice durable plastic things you can get too that are far more affordable. So I would just wonder about the language of that there. And then it talks about bistro sets must be located on the sidewalk only. I'm just trying to think of a business such as East Side Eatery might want to put them out, but I don't know if they have a sidewalk per se in front of their building, or would it just go?
Yeah, they do.
Do they have one there? Okay, I was just trying to think of an example where a business like that might not have a sidewalk. And again, I didn't want to pigeonhole them into saying, well, you can't have them because you don't have a sidewalk. As long as there's space in front of the building to have, maybe there isn't a place that doesn't have a sidewalk in front of it. Anyways, that was my only other thought. Thank you.
I think East Side Eatery though would be on private property also, just so like this would only be on public walkway. So if it's their own lot, there's provisions for how they can apply for that now.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Beyond the patio set, which is typically obviously restaurants, lounges and so forth, is this an opportunity to expand this? For example, hypothetically, if the Wednesday night market and say downtown businesses want to set up sale tables on the sidewalk, is this, I don't know, do you want to go there or want to keep specific to the history of the patios being typically the restaurants and lounges? Is that an opportunity that farmers markets, if it ever went downtown in years future, or say the Wednesday night market, which is obviously been successful for downtown traffic, if businesses hypothetically want to stay up later, do you want to give them opportunity to have tables in the front of their businesses that, with the DART program being put in place in the future years of trying to promote the downtown? Is that something that you want to go, or do you want to keep specific to patios?
Go ahead, Chief Cuddy.
So your land use bylaw actually does permit the temporary placement of goods, whether on a table or just out for sale on streets right now. It's under basically the same provisions that they can't restrict things. They need to be secured. They need to be brought in at night. So there is provisions that would allow someone to do that during farmers market events, or if they wanted to just self-organize with other people in their block and have an outdoor sale, they certainly could do so.
My apologies.
And we do have businesses that in fact do that now. It's just that there's no formal permitting process for them to do it. There's just rules that they have to abide by. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just governed through those provisions in the land use bylaw. There's no specific permit for each one that wants to.
I don't think there's any reason for any apology, to be perfectly honest with you. That's a genuine effort to try and make provisions to make business easier for our vendors. I mean, that's fine. Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd just like to say I'm happy with this policy, clarifying what the rules are for the people that are going to be using this. And I'd like to make that motion that council approves the updated on-street patio policy 61-256.0120250 effective March 28th, 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Gullickson. Did you intend that to be as amended? Because there was some amendments made already prior. I think there was a few, specifically some definitions and some others that were included in there, and some questions about material types and things like that. So I guess my fear is, as it's put in right now, it could be troublesome. So I just wanted to understand your intent fully.
I didn't think that it was really meant, I mean, there's some discretion on plastic for the tables and so on. I mean,
It doesn't say it. Doesn't
no,
say it.
no, but it does, well, so what would the amendment would be suitable tables and chairs? I mean, if, because I would think if, I didn't see that as an issue, but I could certainly say that should be an amendment then, that suitable seating and tables would be accepted. And I don't know who's going to pick that. Because I mean, it could be, I guess you could have a number of things. You could have wicker chairs, you could have all kinds of things. And I've seen those in other places that are really nice. And so it's not in, if it's not metal or wood, it wouldn't be accepted, is what you're saying.
Director Thompson?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So there were a number of discussions. So perhaps I'll kind of go through a couple of them that I think would maybe up for consideration in an amendment. And the first one was the definition of bistro set. And I had read out a definition as an alternative to the one in the policy. But since there was some discussion around the materials items, I would propose an amendment to my amendment. And I'll read it in its entirety. So it's.
Yeah.
I retract my earlier amendment. Just for consideration, so means the bistro set means a small outdoor dining table 30 inches in width or less, constructed of highly durable materials with matching chairs. And then the rest of the definition would remain the same. So let's, I guess, proposed amendment number one. Proposed amendment number.
Director Thompson?
Sure.
Because your overall definition differed so drastically, I would prefer that you read it in its entirety.
I certainly can do that. So from the beginning, a bistro set means a small outdoor dining table 30 inches in width or less, constructed of highly durable materials with matching chairs. Bistro sets are typically made to seat 2 people. Applicants may request consideration of alternatives, and planning and development department staff have authority to use such discretion based on individual circumstances.
Thank you for that clarification. That is a drastic improvement from what was put forward in the original document, from my perspective. Everyone else? Councillor Gullickson?
Yes, I would accept that as an amendment to my motion. Now, you said you had others that you wanted to change within that?
Based on the feedback tonight around accessibility, I would propose then to add a statement to section 8.1.31 and then reorder the remainder that copies 8.1.1.1. So on the previous page, it says, referring to patios and boardwalks, they be barrier-free and accessible. This includes the patio and boardwalk being level with the sidewalk, not impeding pedestrian wheelchair movement. I propose that it's be barrier-free and accessible, and that the bistro set not impede pedestrian or wheelchair movement, etc.
See, my opinion of that was that it was covered under the existing rules already, was it not?
Certainly, it is covered
Yeah.
under existing rules. It would just add another layer of certainty for applicants reading this policy and not necessarily reading the land use bylaw.
All right. So I will make the motion still as amended.
Very good.
Because
Thank you.
I felt that it was kind of already there anyway, so.
So
I'll do
I haven't spoken on item yet. I just want to say that overall, I certainly support this policy. However, a couple areas where we can clean things up in addition to that one definition, which I did find problematic. The purpose of the policy, the item in red, that's fair enough, including applications for bistro sets, but it immediately suggests that those are available to be placed on roads, and that's not the case. So if that could just read differently, applications for proposed patios on public roads and or bistro sets on public sidewalks. It just removes that ambiguity. And then also to clean it up on item 5.2 of the application, it kind of says the same thing, suggesting that bistro sets can be on roads, and that's clearly not the case. And 7.2 as well. Those two kind of go hand in hand. It's clarified on 7.2, but then you're 3 pages into the document and it says bistro sets may apply to be located on the sidewalk only. So let's have it flow through altogether. Thank you for updating the bistro set portion. I guess the one item that I found a little odd was that the application is good for 2 tables or nothing. And I'm not sure that that necessarily suits a broad enough application base. It may very well suit some of the ones that are perhaps in pursuit of this currently. However, I think that should be something based on frontage of business, perhaps. Not sure the exact wording of what that may be, but I mean, clearly, if a business frontage of 15 feet can have 2, and then you've got one that's on a corner lot that's got, I don't pick a number, 100 feet. Why are they only allowed to have 2 tables? I mean, if it's not impairing pedestrian traffic on the sidewalk, and they can have 6 or 8 or 10, whatever the number may be, then personally, I'm fine with it if it meets all the other criteria. But there must be a distance that is required to accommodate a bistro set, and it's 2 chairs and table of some distance. So if we could perhaps come up with a way of making it applicable to all sizes of properties, I think would be perhaps more, or a little more equitable. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but it seemed odd to me that a monster lot's allowed 2 or a tiny one's allowed 2. Like, it just seemed odd to me. Director Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Creasy, for the feedback. Certainly, we did think about that in terms of the postage stamp, and while for larger lots with a larger frontage, it does hinder them from being able to utilize more bistro table sets, even if they have the room. For smaller lots, it I guess you could say provides them more of an advantage to be able to utilize that if the space is available, and creates an equitable playing field for both. And the thought process initially for us was that if a business has a large frontage that can accommodate a number of tables, then perhaps they're ready for a patio. If they want 3 or 4 or 5 tables, then perhaps a patio is actually the more appropriate mechanism or use of outdoor seating on street. But that's just where we landed, and certainly that we weren't fixed on that. But we do have we did think of an alternative regarding frontage that was a bistro table every 3 meters rounded up. So if you had 5 meters with the frontage, it's just over 1, so you'd get 2 bistro tables for that one, or if you had 7, it'd be 3. So that was an alternative that we thought of. We just picked one.
No, and I appreciate that reasoning. Myself, I prefer the alternative, just because while a business that you said that grew to that size or whatever that might want to consider a patio, there are a lot of criteria that would preclude them from having a patio. And quite frankly, that ought to be the choice of the business, which they choose to go. They clearly cannot have the option of both by this policy, which is fine, but it still should be their choice, I think, if we're going to make allowance for it. So myself, I would prefer to see the distance methodology as opposed to the 2 or nothing. Just to mess with your motion, Councillor Gullickson.
Some more.
I don't know what everybody else's thoughts on that, but is it reasonable to expect some amendments, or would you prefer to bring this back reworded at a later date? Or is this something that is timely at this point? What would be preferable? Chief Gowdy?
I believe we can accurately capture the amendments that you've given, which should be the alternate definition that Director Thompson has read out. It would be the 3 meters, 1 every 3 meters rounded up in terms of limitation on placement. And was there a third? Third was
Accessibility.
accessibility.
And then just some clarification on wording with the,
That's right. Bistro versus on the street.
Yeah,
Bistro
I
on the
have that
street.
as well.
However, there is no, to my knowledge, there'd be no harm in delaying this to the next meeting, correct?
Certainly no harm. We are well in advance of patio season. It'd be up to council's discretion whether they'd like to see it back before they approve it or whether they're comfortable with administration making those changes. Certainly we could.
I would suggest that council would be fine with administration making those adjustments that further clarifies that policy and would be willing to vote on it this evening. Is that a fair assessment? Very good. So as Councillor Gluckson read his motion into the record, it says as amended. So I would assume that that would mean to be as amended with all of the items that you have just identified. Is that accurate in your opinion?
That's fair for me. I think those are good amendments that make it clearer for the people that will be applying for these.
Very well. Does anybody have any additional items, questions, or clarification? Very good. With respect to that motion, then all those in favor? Any opposed? That is unanimously in favor. Thank you for wading through that item. That was a little lengthier, I think, than perhaps anyone expected. So
Thanks for the feedback.
Chief Gowdy?
I have been reminded by one of my colleagues that the passing of the new policy does not automatically rescind the old policy. And so I would ask that council consider tabling a motion, or sorry, posing a motion that would rescind the existing on-street patio policy. I'll read the number just for Denise's benefit here, or Coordinator Balbono, 61/256.01 2020 PO. Just so that we don't have the two policies on record.
Very good. Who has not made a motion yet this evening? Councillor Connick?
I would be prepared to make that motion so that Director Piché doesn't have to bring 1,000 relations later.
Very well. I think everybody's clear with the intent. Thank you for that, Councillor Connick. All those in favor? That is unanimous. That is rescinded. Thank you. I believe that brings us down to item 6.4 as listed in your agenda, Affordable Housing Steering Committee and the terms of reference amendments contained within. Director Lapointe, the floor is yours.
Good evening once again, Mayor Creasy and Council. This evening, Council is asked to approve an amendment to the Affordable Housing Steering Committee terms of reference. As you may recall, the Affordable Housing Steering Committee was initially ad hoc but became a permanent council committee in June 2021. Currently, it consists of 6 to 8 members, all of whom must be Lacombe residents. 2 council members comprise a portion of the committee membership, and all public members serve in an at-large capacity. The recommended amendment includes the Lacombe and District Family and Community Support Services Executive Director as a permanent committee member. This change will advance a continued understanding of community-specific social issues and priorities. Additionally, it will provide continuity for the committee should a change in the Lacombe and District Family Community Services leadership occur. Since the release of the agenda on Thursday, administration has confirmed that both the Affordable Housing Committee and Lacombe and District Family and Community Support Services chairs support this change. Should council choose to approve the amendment, administration will inform the public of the decision via council highlights and post that revised terms of reference on our municipal website. Administration is recommending that council approve the amended Affordable Housing Steering Committee terms of reference as presented. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Don't remember this because I was on this committee last term. There was no county representation on the board, was there in the past?
That's correct.
So we as FCSS are starting to reach some county support for FCSS programs, which indirectly is sometimes of those of less fortunate, which is affordable housing. Would it be, if this will entail somewhat of the region, does it justify to ask for a possibility of a county member for further the possibility of county funding? As we have other departments that are supported, like recreation, that some county residents may, I don't know, maybe affordable housing then takes place in outside of the parameters of support temporary. It's just like our affordable housing ownership is not directly intended for long-term. It's to help those to get out of that position, right? I don't know.
If it was council's intent to pursue joint applications for funding, then I would recommend that looking at a county member may be appropriate. The logic is just the continuity. So if the executive director did not want to serve on the board, perhaps we would lose that insight from FCSS. Additionally, administratively, the change, although not that big, requires a resignation from the previous executive director and then a request to actually add the new executive director, providing that they're interested in fulfilling that role.
With that philosophy, then if an executive didn't want to serve on the board, as you had suggested, by chance, if they didn't want to be there, would you want them there anyway then? Perhaps we're just splitting hairs over something that really doesn't mean a lot. I'm just not sure I fully appreciate the advantage of a permanent member and what, I'm not sure the however minimal they are, the potential risks outweigh the potential benefits. Chief Gowdy?
It's simply a matter of administrative efficiency that really, rather than this change, we could have brought one that said, we've received resignation from previous FCSS director and a letter of application from the current FCSS and processed it that way. If you make this change, then that's automatic. Considering how frequently it happens, it's probably 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Okay.
But that's what was behind.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, McCrease. I think with a board of this demographic, I think it just makes sense, the FCSS and like being on the FCSS board, but also from being on the board. And for example, we'd have Mrs. Kite that was already on the Lacombe Foundation, right? Which it just made sense to invite individuals of that association with them organizations to have input, I guess. And I think you want the best collaboration within the agencies that have input upon bringing upon solutions, I guess. And so I support it, if that makes sense.
Councillor Connick?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the SSS member being on this board. I think though this is a Lacombe. I get your point, Councillor Ross, with trying to get a Lacombe County. I think if Lacombe County got funding, and I don't know if they have access to affordable housing funding like municipalities do, or if that's different, but I suspect they would probably use that in smaller communities. I'm not, anyway, I like the makeup of the committee as it is No.
Was anyone prepared to make some sort of a motion in this item? Councillor Dallas?
I'd like to make the motion that council approves the revised Affordable Housing Steering Committee terms of reference as presented.
Thank you. Any other items? We will call the, we'll call the question. All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is unanimous. Thanks, everyone. So we do have a couple of in-camera items, which we will get to after I just go through the meetings, both for the public at home and for council here. I'm not sure if my agenda is pretty exactly the same as yours, but it indicated an April 4th meeting on there, and that is an oversight. And the first or the next upcoming meeting is Monday, April 11th, and that is a regular council meeting here in Chambers at 5:30 p.m. Then again on Monday, April 25th, same details. And then one to be added that is perhaps not in your notes is on May 2nd, is a council committee of the whole meeting here in at City Hall at 5:30 p.m. So you might want to update your calendars accordingly. Thank you for that notice, Legislative Coordinator Valabono. I appreciate it. And I believe that is all of our business up to the in-camera portion, of which there are only 2, I believe. So if I could have a motion from someone, please. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would move that we go into camera, in camera at 6:50.
Thank
or
you.
Whenever you decide.
No, 6:50 it is. Very good. All those in favor?